You're listening to Pixelated Audio, and today we have a Halloween-themed expansion pack.
Welcome back to another expansion pack. Today we're doing kind of a special themed version where we're kind of going with a Halloween vibe.
Yeah, Halloween is fast approaching, so we thought, that'd be fun to kind of take just a whole bunch of random, kind of spooky, scary, odd tracks and mix them all up.
Yeah, a lot of them are really odd. It's not necessarily from horror-themed games.
Right.
I mean, when we were talking about this, it was like, hey, well, let's do a bunch of tracks from games that wouldn't normally be, like horror themed.
Yeah, not like your Splatterhouses or the Clock Tower, stuff like that.
Yeah, like we did last year.
Yeah.
But I actually kind of cheated. I went with some that are horror themed, but it wasn't intentional. It just kind of happened that way. But so today we're doing a bunch of tracks that are from like creepy moments in games or horror themed games. There's a whole Halloween vibe around it. So hope you like some of the tracks. The track that just brought us in was Hydro 1 from System Shock 2 for Windows. It was developed by Irrational Games and Looking Glass Studios, published by Electronic Arts, and this track was composed by Josh Randall.
Nice. It's a nice way to start off this episode. I thought the track was very sinister kind of feeling.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's a creepy kind of fast pace, almost like chase, like you're being like chased through the halls of some evil mansion or something.
Yeah, no, I could totally see that. Like the parts that are kind of slower, it feels like maybe you thought you got away, and then like the killer jumps out again, and you're like, oh no, he's right behind me. So, but I even thought that some of the samples sounded like almost like cats screeching, like almost like cats being tortured or something like that, which I thought, oh man, that's really creepy. So.
Yeah, I first was introduced to this game. I went over to a friend's house and we played it. I didn't have it growing up, and so went over to a friend's house, and I remember we played it late at night. I was like staying the night there or something. I was in high school, so I was easily scared still. And no, anyways, so I went over to his house, and I remember it was it had just come out like within like a few days or something, and we started playing it, and I remember it being really creepy. So I kind of went back and I was like, oh man, I remember the music being really freaky for this game. So it was a track that I picked out for today's show. It's not necessarily like an overly scary game. I don't know if it's meant to be I mean, it is kind of like a survival horror in a sense, but it's not meant to be like just super spooky. It's more like a fast-paced, like thrill kind of thing. Yeah,
and I got that from the music. It was kind of intense, a lot of up-tempo, and I really loved when it would hit those parts where it would get almost kind of silent, and I was like, wow, that's kind of eerie. So I thought the pacing of this track was really good between the really intense parts and then kind of giving you a little bit of a break, but still creeping you out during that break.
Well, there's something about that too, and I'll tell you in a second here. So Josh Randall, aka Robot Kid, he was the producer of this game for System Shock 2, and he was the producer of Thief. He's also the creative director of Harmonix now, so Guitar Hero, Rock Band. And when he was working at Looking Glass Studios, he was not necessarily just like a composer there. It was done by a few other guys. There's Ramin Djawadi and Eric Brosius, who I think just did sound effects, but and like some arrangement of the audio. But Josh Randall, he did some of the tracks in this game. He did some of the compositions. It's really interesting how it turned out because this game uses music dynamically based on where you are in the game.
Oh, nice.
So this track is kind of a lie in a sense because this was pre-made for the soundtrack, but it is music from the game.
Right.
But it was kind of pre-programmed out. So the way that it worked is... Actually, let me back up a minute here. So basically, when the game was about to be released, there was like a month left in development, and they're like, you know what? We need the music now. We need to start making it. And so Josh Randall, he was like, okay, I'll put together some demo stuff for you to play with. And he's talking to Eric, the sound kind of engineer and the sound designer who did the sound effects, and he created what he thought were just a few demos, each a few minutes long, and it was these fast-paced beats and stuff like that. And so he handed them over to Eric, and Eric grabs them and he chops them up into like little tiny segments, like each 4 to 10 seconds long. And then using the game's engine, he made it so where in certain trigger points, the new kind of loop will start up. So this track is a series of these little chopped up pieces that were essentially created by Josh Randall, but put together systematically with the game's engine by Eric Brosius.
Nice. Yeah, that's kind of nice. He's almost like the serial killer, like chopping up the song. But no, that's cool to see like
right?
a song that's interactive. I think that, I mean, back in the earlier days, you could try to kind of fake something that felt interactive, but then to have the ability to make it interactive, especially for a horror theme game, I think they can just really up the intensity to where like the sound is triggered by you doing certain things to really impact the player.
Right. And it would just change dynamically like that. And that's pretty cool. And this was done in 1999. So it wasn't something completely new. It had happened in other games prior, but I think that it worked really well for this type of game, this survival kind of thriller. And the game itself is a first-person shooter, and it's more of like a role-playing game. And if you've played BioShock, well, this is its kind of, BioShock is basically the spiritual successor to all the System Shock games.
Oh, nice.
And so it's a pretty fun game. It's got the same first-person view, and you run around, and you can upgrade stuff, and it's got that RPG element. But I remember it being pretty intense and pretty tough, and I don't know.
That's pretty cool.
It was a pretty fun game. I would say you can buy it on, I think, Good Old Games right now, like GOG.com, and it's probably only a few bucks, but yeah, it's pretty rad.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyways, you are up next, my friend. What do you got?
I'm gonna pick a game that's a little bit more modern. We don't get a chance to play a lot of really modern tracks on here, so I'm gonna pick a track from the game Fez, and the track is called Death. You just heard Death from the 2012 indie game Fez, developed by Polytron Corporation and published by Trapdoor, composed by Rich Vreeland, who's better known as Disasterpeace.
Disasterpeace, me and you have been listening to him for a very long time. This track is, to be perfectly honest, it's not what I would listen to on a day-to-day basis. This isn't something that I would put... If I heard this, I'd be like, it's a little bit off-putting. It's a little depressing. I think I'm going to flip it over to the next track.
You can kind of feel like that sunshine start fading and the clouds come in.
Not really my taste.
Yeah.
But the things it does well, I do like. It does have a very eerie vibe. I was thinking like, man, if we wanted to recreate this track, I just have to go buy a lawnmower, and you buy a lawnmower, and I'll set mine to like a high RPM. You set yours to a low, and then we'll record ourselves like 3 blocks down, and we'll have the same exact intro as this song.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that this song does to kind of make you feel uneasy. I think one of them is that kind of humming sound in the background.
That's a lawnmower sound.
Yeah, it makes you feel kind of confined and like you're being like squished into a box.
Right.
I think that it also has a little bit of that classic like haunted castle kind of feel with some of it.
Right.
So when this came on, some of these tracks today that I'm going to play, I actually sought out and picked them. This one was one that kind of came up a little bit randomly. I haven't played through Fez. I've played a little bit. It's a very disorienting type game in general, but I thought it was interesting that it has this cuteness to it when you first start playing, and this song is very not what you would expect.
Right. I like this game a lot. It, like you said, it's disorienting. I haven't played it to completion. I put some time into it, and early on when it first came out, and I don't know. It's not that I didn't like it to continue. I think I just had other things going on. But this track, I know that the soundtrack of this game is very, very well done.
Yeah.
It's funny that the first game we play from Fez, or the first track we play from Fez, is this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But goes with the Halloween theme, so it's all right. You get one free ticket today.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, this game came out a little while ago on Windows and Mac, and now it's out on Xbox 360, PS3, 4, and Vita.
Right.
So that's how I have it on the PlayStation TV that I wanted to eventually get to. I went through Limbo and stuff like that recently, trying to knock off some games that have just been sitting there for a while, but still haven't gone through this one altogether. But Disasterpeace, I mean, he's got some games like Bit Trip presents Runner 2, Future Legend of Rhythm Alien. So that's another one that's got an amazing soundtrack. Then some other games are like The Floor is Jelly, Monsters Ate My Birthday Cake, and Gunhouse is a recent one.
Right,
so.
But to be honest, like some of his best work isn't even video game related.
Yeah.
If you go to his I think it's Bandcamp page.
Oh, yeah, on his website too. He has a lot of his music.
Right. Like I've purchased all of his stuff. I mean, it's just some of the stuff he does is just fantastic. I can't believe it's just so well done. It should be in a game, but it's not.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it doesn't need to be. It's very fun to listen to on its own.
Yeah.
Some of those tracks are the tracks that he's done are just wow.
Yeah, and he's known as a chiptune artist.
Right.
But what I thought was interesting for this game is he really limited himself and wanted to do something a little bit different that's not as chiptune sounding. So I thought that was really neat. And this, like I said, this soundtrack came out really, really well.
Yeah. Anyways, so the track I'm going to play, so we're going to step back in time even more because we're going to go over to the Famicom. And we're going to play a track called Ichirou and Mamiya for Sweet Home on the Famicom.
Nice.
was a track from Sweet Home called Ichirou and Mamiya. It's a pretty creepy little track. It's hard to get the same vibe across with like
early chip tunes.
Yeah, early NES hardware and stuff. But this game is pretty insane, and the music, if you know the atmosphere that it's put in, it becomes very, very creepy. And nice. I think that's what, for me, I was listening to it, I was like, man, this is pretty creepy. And I did play the game, and so even now more so, knowing what's going on in the title made the track even more, I think, kind of disturbing to me.
Yeah, I thought when the track first started, it reminded me a little bit of like Mario getting to like Bowser's castle, and then the music kicks in, and I didn't have that same feeling, but I thought it definitely, things weren't going well for the characters in the game. Like it's not a happy sunshine spot, I'm guessing. So I thought it was very cool. I really liked the scales and that boom, boom, like in the background kind of thing. Like I thought that was pretty cool. Like the two different channels playing off each other, I thought was really neat.
Right.
Really fun track. I really loved the just like that chiptune feel of it, though.
Yeah. No, and it's hard. Like we were just saying, like it's hard to create that spooky, scary atmosphere with NES hardware. But when you can do it within the right context, it does have a very dark feeling. And this game is very intense, very, very dark. It was developed and published by Capcom, and it was composed by Junko Tamiya. And she worked on a lot of other titles for Capcom. She did Commando, Codename Viper, Gunsmoke, Little Nemo, and the Dream Master for NES. She also did Bionic Commando for the NES and the Game Boy conversion. Wow. And then she's also done 1943 Battle of Midway and Strider for the arcade. She really knows how to use specific hardware. I mean, listen to like Codename Viper or Bionic Commando. Those soundtracks are phenomenal. And so you can tell she knows what she's doing. And I think when she was brought on to do this game, she had in mind what she already wanted to create. And that's why she was able to put out something that had a similar tone as the game shows, I think. The game never came out in the States, though. Never came out anywhere but Japan. So it's a little bit hard to come by. It's a psychological horror RPG based on the Japanese horror film. And it was supervised by the film's director as well. Oh, wow. So it's got the same director of the film, making sure, overseeing that everything is kind of going the way he wants for the game. And the game, though, is considered the main inspiration for Resident Evil.
Oh, wow. That's very cool.
It was meant to be Sweet Home remake, according to Computer and Video Games Online. Yeah. But, kind of went off into its own thing. But I always thought Resident Evil was inspired by Alone in the Dark, because it felt more like that style. But I guess, if you look at the similarities, there's a lot there.
Well, I mean, it's like you said, it may have started out like Sweet Home, but then completely went in a different direction as it got closer to being released.
Right. And there's a few similarities, but let me tell you a little bit about the story. So it takes place in 1959. 30 years earlier, a famous artist named Ichirou Mamiya, he hid several valuable frescoes throughout his mansion, and then he mysteriously disappeared. Nobody heard from him or anything. Back to 1959, when the game actually takes place, a small team of documentary film people go, and they decide to check out this abandoned mansion and go find this artwork and, film a show on it or film a documentary on it. Yeah. And as soon as they get inside, they're trapped. And a ghost appears of a woman who says that she's going to kill any trespassers that come, into the mansion. So the team splits up, Scooby-Doo style.
I don't know why they would do that.
Yeah, I know. And they want to find a way out. So they're splitting up. And it's a lot like Resident Evil in that sense, right?
Yeah, because in the first game, you run to the mansion, and then you are trapped, and then because you can't go back outside because of the dogs, and then you split up.
Look for clues. Yeah. So anyways, there's a ton of monsters and structural traps and stuff like that because it's this dilapidated building, right? And so there's a lot going on with this eerie mansion already. Anyways, the story is really twisted, man. And the game featured random battles. And so if a character dies in your party, you start, I think, with 5 or something like that. If you die, you're dead. You're out. Yeah. So your team
kind of
gets
like Fire Emblem or something.
Right. Except you don't get other team members. Yeah. You get smaller and smaller. So if you have like a nurse on your team and she's the one healing people
and she
dies, you really have to find like health items to keep your party afloat. Wow. Basically. Yeah. And there's a lot of this really brutal and like disgusting imagery in the game. So like I was saying, it's an example of why it never came to the States.
Yeah.
Why it was never released in Europe, because it was just way too overboard for us.
Yeah.
At the time, we had
very strict censorship laws, and then
Yeah.
it seemed like around PlayStation time was when it really kind of let loose, and you could have something like Resident Evil, people being eaten alive and gore everywhere. But this sounds really
it's
creepy.
a really twisted game. And so I was first introduced to it by a buddy of mine who, actually a few friends of mine who was the creator of Bloodlust Software. If you know Nesticle, he was, Nesticle was part of Bloodlust Software. Anyways, he was the one that was like, oh, you got to check this game out. It's so twisted. And so I checked it out. It was in Japanese. And I think there was an English patch at the time. I don't remember how I played it, but I recently went back and started playing it because this game level design is fantastic. It's amazing. It's great because you basically discover stuff on your own throughout the game. You discover all these story parts. And I only really touch the surface of the story. I mean, there's so much more to discover, so much more twisted stuff that's going on. Just kind of left me speechless after playing, because I recently went back and I was like, man, like this is very well done. And I found a quote because I was curious what other people thought of this title. And Destructoid actually did a little tiny article on it, and they said, let me find it here. It's this game is nearly flawless, and it isn't only one of the best JRPGs of all time, it's also one of the best games ever on the Famicom.
Nice.
So, I mean, and other people too said the same thing. Like, this game is fantastic. It's, you have to play it. And
looks like I'm gonna have to find that English patch. And
yeah, it's very well done. Anyways, it was a kind of creepy track, but now it even has more weight to it, right?
Well, I mean, in none of these tracks were intended to be heard out of context. I mean, they're making these songs for specific parts and specific games, and games are a very visual medium. So hearing any of these songs out of context is kind of weird. But I can definitely see how knowing the context of this track is just nuts.
Yeah. Anyways, you're up, man.
Okay, so I'm going to play a track from another game that didn't really make it here to the States. The track is called Brainwash from Pulseman.
Oh, nice.
You just heard Brainwash from Pulseman, composed by Junichi Masuda.
Good God, man.
Yeah.
It's at first, like, my brain started just kind of accepting it in the beginning. I was just like, okay. Man, this is kind of hard to swallow. And then all of a sudden, like, 2-minute mark in, it's like, boom.
Yeah, those like death
boom,
drums.
and then double speed. And it's...
Yeah, I thought I really like how the chimes start out in the beginning, and they don't necessarily feel creepy at all. And then that, like, there's that kind of deep bass beat that comes in, and it really makes those chimes feel more creepy.
Yeah, well, and I
it
think
changes the feeling of everything.
I think what it is those chimes are in a certain key, and the bass itself is in a different key, and it's kind of a little bit flat from I guess you can call it melody jingle thing, and so it creates this really kind of discordant sound across the song, and it keeps it really, like, if you listen to it just by itself, there's moments in there where I was like, man, this sounds like this, the composer must have been like on drugs or something.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't sound like good at all.
Yeah.
And then you can see where it's going, though. You can see like the kind of theme around it. And but actually, why don't you explain the theme around it? Because it still left me in like with a big question mark.
Yeah, so this game, it came out in 1994, and like I said, it didn't really come to the States. It kind of did. So it came out in Japan only in 1994, and then the US got it through the Sega Channel, which pretty much means it didn't come to the US.
It didn't come to the US.
Basically, a few people played it.
I'm telling you, my cousin had the Sega Channel, and that was how I was exposed to it. But I never heard of it outside of his house.
But the game did resurface in 2007 for the Wii Virtual Console in Japan, and in 2009 it came to the US for the Wii Virtual Console. So cool. There are a few people that have probably played this.
I have played it.
Yeah,
I have played this game.
I haven't played it. It comes up in the library all the time. I love the artwork for it. It just feels like a really cool, like 90s platformer, which this is it's an action platformer.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's exactly what you're saying is exactly why I played it, because I was looking at the title and I was like, oh man, dude, that looks cool. I can just try it out. I only honestly played it for like 15, 20 minutes, but I think Project 2612 or something, like the website used this as one of like their logos.
Oh, nice.
I didn't know that at first, and I was like, oh, that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
All right.
No, it's a very cool looking game. It feels kind of Mega Man like,
right.
And it actually even shares a lot of Mega Man-ish themes to the game.
He looks like pretty identical to Proto Man.
Yeah, he feels a lot like a Proto Man. So even the story is, it's a weird version. It feels very weird compared to Mega Man. But so basically, the game takes place in the 21st century, where a scientist and computer engineer, Doc Yoshiyama, creates this really advanced AI system called Sea Life, and he puts it into a female form. And then the doctor, he actually falls in love with it, and then he digitizes himself and uploads himself to the computer's core, and they eventually make love. And so they birth...
Sweet computer love.
Yeah. So they birth a half human, half sea life boy called Pulseman. So yeah, so he's half human and he's half AI system.
Okay.
Think of it as like a weird Mega Man is, like if like Dr. Light was like fell in love with Roll and then like created Mega Man, was like his
very
child,
bastardized Mega Man. Yeah.
So, but what becomes kind of cool is that Doc Yoshiyama, he spends too much time digitized in the computer world, and when he comes back, his brain is kind of warped, and he creates this new program called Eureka, which allows sea life beings, so these AI beings, to materialize in the real world.
Okay.
So then what he does is he creates a gang called the Galaxy Gang, and they basically become cyber terrorists. So Pulseman comes to the real world to save it, and he basically has to hunt down his father. So I was like,
dude, that's actually a pretty sweet story, actually.
Yeah, I mean, in the soundtrack to this game is really good.
That's why I know this game, is because of the soundtrack. That's
I mean, I would love to just play all these songs. So it's interesting. And then when I found out that the game was developed by Game Freak and published by Sega, I was like, wow, this is like the people that do Pokemon. This game is so weird. But this predated Pokemon. So,
right.
Which is kind of neat, because a lot of the people that worked on Pulseman, they moved on to work on Pokemon. So they started on the Pokemon series.
Interesting.
And you know, a lot of them kept going. So it's such a weird, perverse kind of start to a story, and then you know, kind of progresses into this really cool action platformer. And like I said, this was for the Mega Drive, and it did really well.
You know, we're doing an episode on this eventually.
Yeah,
right?
I would love to do an episode on this. So because this game was also received really, really well. So IGN loved the game, and they praised it for its graphics and said it was one of the cleanest, most crisp, most attractive platformers on the Genesis ever. So I was like, wow, that's really cool. That sounds really good. So, I mean, and it's just a really cool game. So
yeah, it's an interesting track. I was thinking, like, out of all the tracks in this game, why did you pick this track? And then I thought, oh yeah, this is a Halloween themed. I get it now. I get it now. There's the soundtrack is amazing. Go check it out. I mean, it's pretty good. I'm sure go to YouTube. I'm sure it's on there.
Yeah, there was a few tracks I was actually kind of debating about picking for this one that would fit into this episode. So there's a very creepy vibe to this game. I'm sure not all of them are like that, but I mean, there's just a lot of fast paced, really good stuff. So
yeah, it was an interesting track. Let's leave it at that. Anyways, I guess it's my last track today, right?
Yeah.
We're keeping it short today. It's only 3 picks each. So I'm going to pick a track, or I picked a track from a game called Space Hulk, and the track is Hulk 2. right, welcome back. That was Hulk 2 from Space Hulk on the Amiga. 4 blissful channels of Amiga love.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's kind of a running theme, I think, now. We're going to have one Amiga track every expansion pack. It just happens. You know, it's like, I'm a huge Amiga fan, Commodore 64 fan. It's going to be one or the other that it's going to pop up. I love NES. I love Super NES, Genesis. I'm a huge fan. I'm a big arcade, Neo Geo, but Amiga is just, there's some sweet spot about the audio that I have just always loved, and it just pops up.
Me too. I think last expansion pack I played an 8-minute long Amiga track. So
that was good.
It's so good.
So Space Hulk, this track is, I don't know. What do you like? Do you like it?
No, I loved it. I think that it definitely, the beginning of the track very much fit with the theme of this episode.
Right.
With it was very creepy. There's a lot of really cool samples and sounds that were going on. I really like how it was just a very odd sound to me. It also felt very kind of Shin Megami to me, which I love the music to that. It has that kind of like weird noises in the background and the heavy drums and stuff like that, but then it kind of breaks out with all the pitch bending and all the arpeggios and stuff like that. And I mean, that's one of my favorite things about the Amiga. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about any sound from the 80s and 90s is the pitch bending and the arpeggio. So I think this track was excellent.
Yeah, no, the game came out in 1993. And my first exposure is, so there's a lot of Amiga games I didn't get to experience. I had very, very few when we had an Amiga. And so not a lot of people I knew even had one.
Yeah, I didn't have one.
And so my dad was into computers, so it just happened to be that we had that. We had a Tandy. We had a bunch of stuff, a bunch of like old, like, it was just a weird time in my life where I just had so many weird electronics that nobody else had. And I had these very niche games. Anyways, I did have a friend that had this game.
Nice.
But he had it for DOS. So it was released on Amiga, PC 88, and DOS. And my first exposure was, his name is Jeremy Johnson. Not relevant, but he was a really cool kid.
Oh, you want to throw out that credit there. He's exposed you to this.
Yeah. I don't know. I wonder what he's doing today. He's probably playing DOS games. But anyways, I stayed the night at his house and we played this game. It was really creepy. 1993, so I was in grade school then, and this was just a really intense game. It's interesting because it's a real-time strategy, or it's like a tactic game. And what's interesting about this game is you strategically place your squads. So it's based on a Warhammer 40,000 game, and it's basically a board game version, or a video game version of the board game.
Okay.
And so what you do is you strategically place. So imagine like yourself in like this hall on a grid, and you have like a toolbar, and you can kind of move your troops around, and you place them where you want them to go. And then, so that's a mission. And when you hit go, you go into first person view, and it shows that everything that you set out in the kind of board game element, it shows it in first person. So it shows you creaking through the hallways and like labyrinths and stuff.
That's cool.
And going in, and it's a really fun game. And I remember playing it with him. We were just so scared, as kids. I mean, I was a little bit older then, but it was still scary, playing this on a 320 by 240 monitor, VGA. I mean, it was still scary to us, and it was really cool. And I was thinking, like, what kind of scared me growing up? Space Hulk was one of them. And I couldn't remember. I knew it was space something, and I was thinking, like, what was it? And I looked DOS space, and I finally found it. I was like, oh my God, Space Hulk. And so I found the Amiga version, and I was like, oh man, this is excellent. The game itself is mission based, so it's you protecting like the human race against a bunch of invading aliens. But there's some really gruesome scenes. So like if one of your soldiers dies, it shows like the alien over his body. They wear these huge suits, like these huge like mech suits, almost like a BioShock kind of suit. But it shows like the top off, the helmet on the ground, and like the soldier's head just like slaughtered with blood all over the place.
Oh man,
it was really like graphic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a cool game.
That's cool. No, I love when games would do some type of really cool death animation. I mean, you see it in a few games now. But I really remember it from like Resident Evil, stuff like that. You die, and there'd be a specific death cutscene for that. Or they do it in like the Arkham series and stuff like that. If like you're on a penguin mission and you get killed, the penguin will come. But it's cool. I mean, it sounds like a very cool game, especially since you kind of you plan it all out, and then you have to like watch what you did. I think that's pretty
I really
nuts.
think you should go back and play this. I think you should go try it out because, after I was kind of researching it for the show, I was thinking like, man, I got to go back and play this. Like this was really good. And it's excellent. The music was fun. It was composed by Jason Whiteley. And he's done a few other Amiga titles. He hasn't done a whole lot. He did Desert Strike, Return to the Gulf on the Amiga, John Madden Football, and Road Rash. So he did those conversions, and they kind of have their own soundtracks too. Yeah. So I think there's some inspiration from the other original composers. But
because we actually played 2 of those games in a previous expansion pack with Kevster. He had picked Desert Strike and a Road Rash track, but it was from, I believe, the SNES and the Genesis. So.
Right. But his versions are cool. They're really well done. And other than that, I don't know a lot of stuff that he's done. I couldn't find much. But the game was developed and published by EA, so they probably had a bunch of people coming in and out and whatever.
That's awesome.
But anyways, it's your last track of the day.
Yeah, I have a special one. It's a game that you and I discovered kind of accidentally and fell in love with. But before that, I think we should probably get into our plugs, and then we'll get into the track. So
So if you guys like the show, let us know. You can find us online at pixelatedaudio.com. All of our show notes, track lists. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You name it.
Yeah,
we even started putting stuff on YouTube. And like always, if you're new to the show, make sure to check out some of our past episodes. We did a Castlevania Bloodlines episode, which fits with this kind of Halloween vibe. Excellent soundtrack.
Yeah, we even have a Halloween themed episode from last year to check out, which has got a ton of amazing games. I think there's like 8 or more games in that episode.
We kind of went overboard with that. Yeah. So James, let's talk about this last track.
All right, so the game is called Dark Seal, and you and I were...
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
We wanted to play a random arcade game, and we popped it on, and I think we were just wanting to beat an arcade game.
So we played this actually at Extra Life, right?
Yeah.
Extra Life.
A couple of years ago.
Which is coming up. And make sure you guys check the website for the donation link if you guys want to help us out or if you want to join the team.
Yeah, I think it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and because it's a 24-hour gaming marathon, so you and I decided, let's pop on some arcade games, and I think we let it randomly pick an arcade game, and it was like, this looks pretty cool. We started playing it, and the music was nuts.
It was crazy.
And the game was fun too.
Oh yeah. We had a good time. We went all the way through it.
Yeah, we beat the whole thing. We were probably super excited.
Probably put in like 1,000 credits each, but
yeah,
it was fun. Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, so the game came out in 1990 for the arcade. It was developed and published by Data East, composed by Hiroaki Yoshida, Tatsuya Koichi, and Kenji Mori, which we've talked about all these guys before. With Yoshida, you have games like Heavy Barrel, Double Dragon, which we talked about him in our Double Dragon episode. RoboCop, Bad Dudes, Two Crude Dudes, Joe Mac, Caveman Ninja. So it's got some pretty awesome games to his credit.
Totally.
So Koichi has Chelnov, Atomic Runner. We've mentioned that game before too.
Oh yeah.
We've got Ackfancer, Cybernetic Hyper Weapon, Two Crude Dudes, Super Burger Time, Captain America and the Avengers, Joe and Mac 2, Lost in the Tropics. So that's some pretty cool games as well. And then we have just a few games. He only, for his credits, I only saw Ackfancer, Cybernetic, Hyper Weapon, and Dark Seal. So he didn't have a whole lot of credits. But, I mean, the music to this game is really, really good. Yeah, I remember
it was fun.
A specific part where the music just kicked on and we were like, whoa, like, this is really good.
Because we had already started the podcast, actually. No, we hadn't yet.
I don't think so, because this was 2 years ago, two extra lives ago.
Right. So we were listening, we were like, man, if we ever do a podcast, like, we gotta do this. We gotta do this game sometime. Awesome.
Yeah, and every once in a while we talk about this game and we're like, what's that game called? And it's like Dark something, and then
it comes on.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna check this out for this episode, and there was a great track for that. So the track that I picked is called Life and Death Crisis.
Awesome.
So we're going to check that out, and thanks for listening. And we have a new episode coming out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, actually next week. Yeah. Because we are going to release a special episode on Halloween. Yeah. Actually.
So basically 1 day earlier than normal.
Than our normal schedule, yeah. There's a lot of other good stuff out there, too. If you want to hear some Halloween stuff, definitely Pixel Tunes just released a Castlevania handhelds episode. It's excellent. The Halloween season's always fun. You know, the Christmas, it gets really hard because there's not a lot of Christmas video games.
Yeah.
You know, you could pick ice levels and stuff like that, but that's no fun because everybody hates ice levels.
Yeah.
And but Halloween is always fun because there's always these crazy horror games. There's menacing soundtracks and a lot of fun stuff. So give the other shows a listen. If you want to hear some of our old stuff, we already talked about our Halloween episode from last year. That's available. But check out our feed in the next week, and you'll find something new. Yeah.
Anyways. Yeah, so once again, the track is called Life and Death Crisis from Dark Seal on the arcade.